The closest I've ever come to actually talking about Tokyo Ghoul is using it as a throwaway gag at the start of my What's in an OP for Jojo way back at the start of my YouTube career. And in all honesty, I was content to leave it at that, because from what I'd seen of the series, it seemed like yet another hyper-edgy celebration of senseless violence, and I'd kinda had my fill of that and then some with a Kamega kill. But with the new season, Tokyo Ghoul Re-out, I decided to finally give the series another shot. And I'll admit, I drastically underestimated it. Tokyo Ghoul is edgy as hell. There's no getting around that, but it works. It's a series with a lot of heart and something meaningful to say, although note that I say series and not show, because even the first season of the anime doesn't do the manga justice, and the second and third seasons are kinda sorta terrible. Like, Studio Pierrot, we've gotta talk. But not today. Today, I'd like to focus on the one thing that the studio inarguably got right, the OP. Unravel is a fantastic, nuanced opening that makes great use of symbolism and some stunning shot composition to present the themes of the show in a very interesting manner. It's nowhere near my top 10, but I can definitely see why it won Reddit's Best Opening Tournament back in 2015. So today, let's dig into what makes this one of the most well-regarded anime openings of all time, and what hidden meaning we can find inside it. This whole opening is laser focused on presenting us with Kaneki's perspective of Tokyo Ghoul's world and the people, human and ghoul alike, who inhabit it. So it's fitting that we start off seeing the world the same way Kaneki does before his unfortunate accident, in black and white. Ghouls bad, humans good. Then, as the backing music comes in, the whole world comes alive with color. We see Kaneki sitting in an ornate chair in the middle of an endless expanse of water and sky. The way that the chair is framed is reminiscent of the less fancy chair that Kaneki finds himself strapped to in Jason's torture chamber toward the end of the season. The sky and its reflection below represent the world of humans and the world of ghouls beneath its surface. As the OP goes on, reflections and duality become an increasingly important visual motif. In this case, the horizon across the middle of the frame and inverted reflections tell us that Kaneki exists in both worlds, as do Toka and Rize, and even before the color comes in and he actually becomes aware of it, we see that he's been sitting in both his whole life. At a distance, Kaneki looks gray and desaturated, but pulling in closer, we see that he has black hair and a white shirt with blue trim. Likewise, Toka and Rize first appear dull and gray against the vibrant beauty of the sky, but moving near them reveals their own vibrant colors. The closer you get to somebody, this OP is saying, the clearer a picture you get of who they really are. And even the most monstrous people you meet may have hidden depths to them. The direction of the wind gives us a sense of positioning even in the empty void. It's blowing right on Kaneki and left on Rize and Toka, so we can infer that they're standing in front of him. Toka is looking off to the left, ignoring him, while Rize is staring directly at Kaneki. She did say that she's had her eye on him for a while, after all. As her eyes open, the lens shatters, fracturing both the image of Rize and the world behind her. As the show makes very, very clear, even in the lyrics of this song, the world of Tokyo Ghoul is broken, and Rize's attack opens Kaneki's eyes to that fact. Rize fades away as an image of a shattered Tokyo takes her place. One by one, reflections of the show's main characters flit by in the foreground, with most of the ghouls appearing in both their human disguises and their true forms. Interestingly, Toka's brother Ayato only appears as a human, while Nishio only appears as a ghoul, and Mado and Yoshimura are conspicuously absent. After the characters flit by, we see the cracks of the screen slowly disappear and the city distort itself back into a single cohesive image as the title fades into view. This demonstrates the ultimate goal of Kaneki as a character, to fix the broken world by making peace between ghouls and humans. From here, we jump to a shot of Kaneki walking next to a window in some sort of high-rise. While he looks normal in the foreground, in the background his reflection has the red eye of a ghoul. It's possible that the black and white tile under his feet is meant to foreshadow Jason's torture chamber further, but the more interesting environmental detail here is the nighttime cityscape behind him. As the OP moves forward, we see other ghouls reflected in a similar manner, with their reflections almost always being imposed against a bigger image of the outside world. The transparency of these reflections, well, just as a quick aside, the reflections are actually wrong in a lot of these shots. You can see the reflected backgrounds through the bodies of characters who are supposed to be standing in front of them, like the building behind Nishiki, or the railing behind Toka, or the tile showing through Kaneki's leg. This seems to just be an error with how the animators decided to handle transparent layers, and to be fair, you don't really notice while you're watching the actual OP because it goes by so quickly, but yeah, that's not how reflections work. Regardless, this effect creates the impression that these characters are almost like ghosts, living in the human world without really being part of it, having to constantly hide their true selves in order to fit in. The reflections also hammer home the theme of duality. There's more to these characters than meets the eye, which is obvious when you look at, say, Nishiki and Toka, who reveal themselves to have hidden kindness very early on. But it also applies to characters who appear to be absolute irredeemable monsters, like Tsukiyama and Mado, and even to Kaneki's best friend, Hide. Everyone has a side that they don't show the world. While these shots use wildly different camera angles, they keep the points of focus, the characters, in roughly the same position from shot to shot in order to allow your eye to naturally flow through the montage, except for the investigators who are on the opposite side of the screen from the ghouls. Beyond the visual motif running across them, these shots mostly just serve to show us the series' important characters, but a few cool details do stand out. Firstly, Nishiki is the only ghoul who we actually see being framed against the human world instead of it being shown in a reflection. Revealing his true nature to Kimi means that he doesn't have as much to hide as the other ghouls do, and the secret hidden side of his life is much smaller than that of the others. Now, Hide is shown moving over to the investigator's side of the screen, which reflects some of his career choices later in the series, and also he's the only character who we see moving downward in this entire OP, which in terms of cinematic language usually signifies a character falling from grace or descending into hellish circumstances, which is appropriate given that things do not go super well for Hide as this story progresses, especially later in the manga, and that's not the only later development foreshadowed in this OP. Before we get to that though, I want to quickly point out that as Mado is marching forward, he hides his left hand, the one with his wedding ring, inside his pocket, further burying the symbol of the tragedy that drives him to kill ghouls. Lastly, we get a look at Amon leaning against a window as a car drives by. And just a heads up, this part is a bit speculative and involves a spoiler for Tokyo Ghoul Re, so if you want to avoid that, skip to this timestamp. You've been warned. He's the only character in this entire montage whose eyes aren't clearly visible in his reflection. But when the light from the car catches his face, if you squint, you can see his right eye in the reflection, and it doesn't exactly look white now, does it? It's easy to miss, but this foreshadows that Amon will eventually be turned into an artificial one-eyed ghoul like Kaneki, whose black and red eye is on his right side rather than his left. You really have to admire the thought that went into framing this shot in order to hide that detail in plain sight. From Amon, we cut to Rize standing in front of the Tokyo skyline. After a beat, her reflection unleashes its Kagane, shattering the window behind her. Once more, this symbolically breaks down the barrier between the human and ghoul worlds for Kaneki, but it also shows him how broken the world truly is. In a flash, the visuals become more abstract, and Rize's Kagane transforms into a collage of dancing clip art. It's hard to make out all of the shapes spreading from her back, but we can see several red spider lilies in there, the same flowers that show up when she appears to Kaneki in the torture chamber. Spider lilies are often used in Japanese funerals and have a heavy association with death and the afterlife, specifically hell. They're said to guide the dead toward reincarnation, which matches their use in the story, as they signify how Rize becomes a part of Kaneki, both in body and eventually mind, after her death. We see this death happen symbolically as blood red spreads across Rize's white dress, and she closes her eyes, mirroring how she opens them at the start of the OP. Her position to the right of the screen compared to Toka on the left further parallels that opening shot. Next, we see Toka's Kagane emerge from her shoulder like butterfly wings. The way that the images that make up this collage are stretched out, it's difficult to actually discern what any of them are, but this seems to be a mix of man-made and natural shapes, which would reflect Toka's deeper involvement in the human world. When we zoom in on her face, Toka turns to the camera camera and to Kaneki by proxy for the first time, signifying her eventual acceptance of him as a ghoul and a friend. From here we cut to human Kaneki falling through the water, bewildered and terrified. As the camera turns, we see that he's falling upward toward the expanse of sky from the beginning of the OP, as well as his ghoulified reflection on the surface of the water. And we can tell that it's a reflection because his eye is on the wrong side. As Kaneki passes through the surface, his two disparate sides collide and merge together, and out of this fusion emerges his final form, the white-haired, black-jacketed ghoul that he transforms into as a result of Jason's torture session. This version of him contrasts starkly with the black-haired, white-shirted Kaneki from the start of the OP, and not just in his color scheme. Where that Kaneki was in a sad, passive, seated position, this one stands confidently, showing no clear emotion. Kaneki has made a conscious decision about who he wants to be, instead of waffling between ghoul and human, and his ordeals have clearly forged him into a much stronger person than he was when we first met him. As the music dies down, the camera spends a few silent seconds pulling back further from Kaneki, while the sky behind him becomes increasingly desaturated and less vibrant. Kaneki's worldview is becoming starker and less naive than it was when he first entered the world of ghouls, but it never becomes as simple and colorless as it was at the beginning. And as the camera finishes pulling back, the OP ends. Unravel sums up Kaneki's transformation over the course of this season beautifully and succinctly, while giving plenty of clever hints about the characters around him, and even foreshadowing some plot turns from very late in the manga. The consistent visual motif of reflections and broken glass makes it feel much more cohesive than your average jumbled anime OP, but smart shot composition and editing still allows for it to present us with varied and striking imagery. And of course, the theme song itself, Unravel, with its haunting whisper singing, beautiful instrumentation, and somber tone, is absolutely phenomenal as well, and feels very distinct from your average J-rock or J-pop opener. With a few glaring animation errors, it's not quite perfect, but it stands apart for how visually imaginative and information-dense it is. Combining a stellar song with brilliant visual direction, Unravel really is the complete OP package, and it's no wonder that so many people hold it in such high regard. Now, if only Studio Pierrot could make the actual anime that good, but that's a topic for another day. And if you want to see me talk about it, make sure that you hit subscribe to catch every Mother's Basement video as it goes live. For now, I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.